Hey everyone, DQWERTY here, back in the Archery range for my Advanced Archery data pack. I have an update on the pack itself, as well as a technical explanation of how all of these enchantments work to produce the effects they do. The first update is that there's now a resource pack to go along with the data pack. This adds custom textures for the different arrow types. If you don't have the resource pack enabled, all of the custom arrows will just have a default arrow texture, but with it, we can see our slime, prismarine, silent, floating, and the new ender arrows, all with unique texture. The resource pack also adds a custom death message for players that die when they're scrying. While I haven't added or sourced any translations yet, the resource pack also makes it so all of the text strings used in the data pack are translatable. In other updates, the enchantments subtle, repeating, and guiding have all been updated, so they now work together. Moving on to some new features. This first one comes from a suggestion from Mimp8365, and this is that if you are using a scrying bow that either has flame or is shooting a spectral arrow, it gives the player night vision as they're traveling. The next update comes from viewer NotNatTlheus. It is replacing the Raid Seeker update with a new enchantment called Phototropic. And this enchantment works just like Raid Seeker, except it allows the arrows to home in on any glowing entity. This allows it to still be used during raids, though you do have to be more accurate with your timing, or it can allow the spectral arrows to effectively mark an enemy to make them easier to hit for anyone with the guiding arrow. The last update in this version comes from a suggestion from viewer Kindalas, and it adds these ender arrows. These are crafted with 4 regular arrows and 5 ender pearls to give you 4 ender arrows. These function like ender pearls that you can fire out of a bow, with the downside that they do twice as much damage when you land. But it can be combined with all sorts of enchantments to basically allow you to have a very convenient form of fast travel. Now that we've gone over all of the new additions and changes in the latest version, I have the promised technical explanation of how things work. I'm going to start with a brief overview of how all of the enchantments work and the things that are common between them, and then take a closer look at each one in turn. All of the enchantments in this pack follow the same basic format. They all use a projectile spawned trigger to run a function as the arrow the same tick that it is spawned. In this function, we tag the arrow so we know what type of arrow it is. We potentially edit some of the arrow's NBT data, and then we schedule a function called checkAll for 1 tick in the future. While the arrow is in flight, we run this checkAll function, and within that, the first thing we do is we run a check1 function for each arrow. This allows multiple arrows of the same type to be in the air at the same time. Within that check1 function, we check to see if the arrow has been grounded, and if so, we potentially remove the tag or do other stuff depending on what the enchantment is, or we just remove the tag and then the function doesn't fire again for that arrow. Then while we're in flight, we might also do things to edit arrow data, and then after we've run check1 on every arrow, if there are still any arrows of our type, we schedule the same checkAll function for 1 tick in the future again. This allows it to effectively work like a ticking function that only runs when the arrows exist. So, for each of the enchantments, we'll have different things that they do in the start function, different things that they might do while the arrow is in flight, and different things that they do when they land. For the shulking enchantment, when the arrow is spawned, we take the arrow and add a timer. Then we disable gravity on the arrow by setting its no gravity tag to true. While we're in flight, we decrement the timer by 1 each tick, and if the timer has reached 0, we re-enable gravity and remove the tag. We don't care about what happens when a shulking arrow lands. For a scrying arrow, when it is fired, we summon a mannequin and give that mannequin a lot of data from the player, and then we update the player to be in spectator mode and have them ride the new arrow. While we're in flight, we check to see if the player has been dismounted, and if so, return them to their mannequin. And when we land, we start a 2-second return sequence to automatically return the player to their mannequin. For the Ricochet enchantment, we start by tagging the arrow and adding a counter based on the enchantment level of the bow. While we're in flight, we store our velocity each tick so that we can restore it later. When we land, we detect which side of the block we landed on, then invert the velocity in that direction. Then we tell the arrow to keep moving and give it its new updated velocity so that it bounces. We decrease the ricochet counter, and if we've run out of bounces, we remove the tag from the arrow. Because arrows should keep their other functionality after bouncing with ricochet, ricochet checks if we've been in the ground for a single tick, whereas every other enchantment checks if we've been in the ground for 2 ticks to run their land functionality. For subtle arrows, we start by tagging the arrow and summoning a proxy owner. This is an invisible snowball that rides on the arrow. The arrow's owner field is set to be the UUID of this snowball, where this snowball has its owner set to be the player who fired the arrow. This allows us to find the player for other enchantments, such as guiding, that require knowing what the player is doing, while keeping the actual owner of the arrow unknown to anyone hit by the arrow. When we're in flight, we don't do anything. And when we land, we clear data from any nearby skulk sensors or nearby warden entities so that they don't know about the sound event caused by the arrow landing. Finally, we remove the marker from the arrow. For the guiding enchantment, we start by tagging the arrow and summoning a marker. While we're in flight, we get our heading by looking at our position compared to the position of the marker, and then after that, we teleport the marker to our current location. This allows us to know the heading of the arrow every single tick. Then we nudge the velocity of the arrow based on its heading compared to the direction the player is facing. When we land, we untag the arrow, and we remove the marker entity from the world. For the phototropic enchantment, we start by tagging the arrow and summoning a marker that will follow along behind the arrow. Every tick in flight, we find any glowing entities that are ahead of us, using the marker to know which direction we're traveling in, and then we adjust our velocity to intercept. When we land, we remove the tag, and we destroy the marker entity. For the hydrodynamic enchantment, when we start, we tag the arrow. While we're in flight, we boost our velocity if we are in water to counteract the drag that's added by being in water. And when we land, we untag the arrow. Repeating works a little bit differently from all of the other ones. The start doesn't actually start when the arrow is first fired. It starts after a couple of ticks when the arrow has left the space of the owner that fired it. This allows data from any other enchantments to be added to the arrow so that we can then copy that to the duplicate arrows. So after that couple of ticks, we spawn a phantom bow with a timer, and we copy arrow data to the bow. Then our check all actually checks for the phantom bows. And with each phantom bow, we decrement the timer. If the timer has reached 0, we spawn a new arrow and decrement our arrow counter. And if our arrow counter has reached 0, we destroy the phantom bow. Precision also works a bit differently from all of the other enchantments. Before we fire the arrow, we use a using item advancement to see how long the player has been drawing the bow. Then, when we fire, we check to see if the draw time has met 30 ticks, and if so, we apply precision by resetting the initial velocity of the arrow based on the direction the player is facing, and then using some functions to add a bit of random jitter. If it's a level 3 precision, we don't add any random jitter, but if it's level 1 or 2, we do add a little bit, just less than what would have been added by vanilla. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and be on the lookout over the next couple of weeks on some videos going over some fun new things that can be accomplished with the latest round of snapshot features, including right and left click detection on a single item, allowing for some fun Windcraft style magic wands, as well as the ability to now control the player's motion in a fairly seamless way without relying on entity collisions or explosions or any of that. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all in the future.